Hey folks, Joe Bongiovanni here from the Kettle Pond Institute. Having a cup of coffee and wanted to talk about a video that I just watched, the Q5 video of the series of something like, that's question 5, of the series of something like 20 questions that got posed to Bill Mitchell and Randy Wray um, back several years ago, I believe. But this is a series that I've only recently discovered on the net, but it's a really telling series of questions. Primarily because the questioner is actually really trying to get the answers. This is not a cooked up dialogue here. This is something where the questioner is trying to get to the bottom of it. Having asked Randy about how sovereign money, how it comes into existence, is created over 2 or 3 videos, totally avoided the question, totally avoided. Ultimately, only coming to answer it in terms of, instead of saying how sovereign money is created, saying it's created as a liability. Okay, not how is it created, how does it come into existence? Like, what's the procedure, what's the legal foundation, what's the administrative process, how does all that work out? Instead of that, no, he talks about the fact that no, it's a liability of the government, and why should we accept the government's liability to use as money? And the answer is, should be obvious. You know, we're we're a nation peopled in the custom of law, and under the custom of law, the government gets to write the laws with regard to the money system, which they have done. Okay, and under that, and under our acceptance of the rule of law, we use the government's money system. Plain and simple as that. Whether you have tax obligations or no tax obligations, you use the government's money system because it's the only game in town. And in theory, creation of any money by a private entity is counterfeiting, in theory, but we've legalized the crime of counterfeiting, or as Silas Adams calls it, the legalized crime of banking, by making bank credit money legal for tender and payment of any obligation, public or private, settlement of any debt, public or private, in this country. So there should be no mystery to why we use the money system. It works. I want to get to this notion that Randy keeps throwing out, like as if well, if you were a nation that just was starting out, there's no way you could tax people money unless you put the money into circulation. The day you started out. So if we, that's not true at all, by the way. Okay, maybe income tax, that might be true, but here's a fact, a little factoid. The first plug nickel, I'm going to call it, dyed nickel that was, I should say 25 cent, uh, that was created in this country, the day it was created, okay, we had $6 million in debt that we were paying off. We were paying it off. The government was taxing the people to make the payments on that debt, but we hadn't yet created any money. So to say that the government first would need to create the debt in order to tax the people is obviously an error. In a stylized way of presenting the beginnings of a new country, you would say that, well, logically, you can't take something that you haven't made available. Like the ticket to the train or something like that. You can't collect the tickets unless the tickets are out there. It's one of these infamous MMT hypotheses. Um, so Randy says, no, we have to have the taxes first. We have to have. You have to have the taxes first in order for the people to accept the money. If it wasn't for the fact that they didn't have to pay taxes, they would not accept the money. So that's a bogus. Has no standing. There's no empirical evidence of that. There has been some discussions, and most of the discussions have been like, well, no, that's ridiculous. But he says, well, you can't pay with something unless that something's been provided. Well, that's true, okay. But it's been how it becomes provided is in many ways, like right now, it's all bank credit. But they say since currency flows from the government, imagine that the currency flowed from the government. Imagine the passage of the Kucinich bill and the currency flows from the government. Yeah, then I can imagine it. But if you want to postulate it now for someone's imagination, how about postulating like there's no way that the government creates the money, and so therefore there's no way that the currency comes from the government. Period. Okay. But based on his postulation, he says, therefore, it has to be spent first by the government. The implication there is that the government doesn't have to have the money to spend. It doesn't have to have the taxes to spend. It doesn't have to have the balances in its account at the Treasury before the Treasury can write a check or punch a keystroke to advance my Social Security. Okay? That's totally false. It's totally false. You won't find anybody in the Treasury that will agree with them that that's true. And yet they get away with saying it time after time. They keep repeating it. But keeping repeating it and teaching it does not make it real. And so, my job is to come in here and say, hey, we want to reform the money system. We want to do the things that you guys, have the audacity to claim that we're doing now. The result of which is, by making that claim, we never get to do the things that you say we're doing. So that's unacceptable. And poor Bill Mitchell, he pipes in about the fact that one of his American colleagues, that would be Warren, has shown the example of how if you go into the local tax office and pay your taxes with cash, how the tax people, how the IRS, although Bill actually translates it into the Fed somehow, I'm not sure how, but because they're not involved in tax collections. But anyway, he said Warren Moses says they shred that money, and he uses that allegory to example the fact that the government doesn't need the money before it spends. And that allegory is completely false. I put out a video on this about Warren Mosler's first deadly innocent fraud. But is there any proof to it? None. On the other hand, are there financial management procedures in place at the IRS for handling payments received in cash from citizenry? There are those protocols, and believe me, there's no shredder involved. It better get into the Federal Reserve Bank, by the morning. So, sorry guys, none of this stuff really makes sense, and you really haven't informed, especially educated anybody about anything about how to accomplish all those great objectives that we all agree about. How to achieve full employment and economic democracy. You're not going to do it through MMT, because MMT is built on is a house of cards, and it's built on, very unfortunately, Randy Wray's misunderstanding of the nature of money. And it's really time to have the discussion about this. Thanks.